Good evening. This is Friday, August 15th, 81 days until the 2008 presidential election. Unless, of course, they've already held the election, and the only person who knows the outcome is the winner, our new and current secret president, America's 44th President Senator John McCain. Our number 5 story, the presumption and perils, politically and geopolitically, in John McCain's custom of acting as if he already picks up his mail at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Last night, for instance, McCain announced a fact-finding trip to Georgia. Not his own, but that of 2 U.S. senators who happen to be among his strongest supporters and busiest campaigners. Joe Lieberman and Lindsey Graham routinely join John McCain on the campaign trail, even overseas. So when McCain announced their trip, it certainly sounded as if they were going as his presidential envoys, especially since just the night before, Senator McCain admitted to what he called boldness in referring to President Reagan as, quote, another president, before quickly correcting himself.
If I may be so bold, there was another president. At one time, there was a president named Ronald Reagan who spoke very strongly about America's advocacy for democracy and freedom.
McCain even issued his first statement on Russia's military action before the White House did. Given McCain's mockery of Barack Obama as a candidate who didn't know his place, whose own trip abroad looked too presidential, McCain's foreign policy freelancing has invited similar criticisms of him. MSNBC's political team weighing in with Audacity Watch today, while ABC pegged not just pretend President McCain, but also pretend Secretary of State Lieberman and pretend Defense Secretary Graham. A political presumptuousness that might not be so problematic were it not for A, the dangers of sending mixed messages about America's intentions during a volatile, ongoing foreign policy flashpoint, were it not for B, the fact that McCain's pro-Georgian saber rattling, despite a shortfall of actual sabers, just happens to be exactly what Georgia paid for when they paid lobbyist Randy Schooneman, McCain's top foreign policy advisor, $800,000 to push Congress on their behalf. And were it not for C, McCain's decidedly unpresidential habit, unless you want to sound like Reagan at his worst, of saying things like last night's doozy, unchallenged, about Georgia and foreign policy, supposedly McCain's great strength.
My friends, we have reached a crisis, the first probably serious crisis internationally since the end of the Cold War.
No serious crisis in New York City, Washington, and Shanksville. No serious crisis in Afghanistan and Pakistan. No serious crisis that McCain helped create in Iraq. We're joined now by Lawrence Korb, who served President Reagan as Assistant Secretary of Defense and is now Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, as well as an unpaid advisor to the Obama campaign. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Korb.
Nice to be with you, Rachel.
Today's Washington Post headline reads, McCain's focus on Georgia raises questions of propriety. What is McCain doing with regard to Georgia that is raising questions of propriety?
Well, he's not just commenting on the situation, he's trying to make policy. I mean, after all, sending his 2 top advisors to Georgia, announcing we are all Georgians, himself communicating directly with the president of Georgia, really is in not just commenting, it's actually trying to make policy and trying to move this country in a certain direction.
That same Washington Post article quoted you today talking about the risk of sending mixed messages to foreign governments. What's the statecraft rule of thumb on that as an issue, and what's the risk posed by violating that rule of thumb?
Well, whenever you have a crisis, we can only have one voice in the country. We have one president at the time. And what should happen is that he is the one sending the signal, sending the people around so that this country speaks with one voice. And what's happening is McCain actually spoke before Bush did, and he's sending much stronger messages, almost like he's shooting from the hip, to sending messages to Russia and Georgia. And it can be very dangerous if either side overreacts in this very, very delicate time.
John McCain, thus far in this presidential campaign, he has been delivering weekly radio addresses as if he is president. He gave a speech at one point reflecting back on his fake first term in office, the 2013 speech. He's run ads in which he is captioned as President McCain. All of those things are less substantive than what he is doing with Georgia now. But do all of those things together reflect a certain reckless attitude about the weight of the presidency?
Well, I think it's rather ironic because when he goaded Senator Obama into taking a trip overseas, and then Senator Obama gave a speech in Berlin, he accused him of being presumptuous and acting presidential. I'm much more concerned with what he's done now to upset American foreign policy. I think voters can decide whether he's being presumptuous, but what he's doing is very dangerous for the security of this country.
When John McCain recently flat out ruled out any use of force by the United States with regard to this Georgia and Russia conflict, while that's something that I don't think a lot of Americans would find controversial, was he out of bounds in ruling that out as if he's the one who gets to decide?
Well, again, this is not something he should be doing. I think it's correct to rule out their use of force, but I'm not the president. This is something for the president to do. We don't know what messages that Secretary Rice is communicating to the Russians and to the Georgians. And, you know, it's rather ironic since McCain is always arguing, particularly when it comes to Iran, well, you never want to take the military option off the table. Well, here he is taking it off and could be undermining our leverage, particularly with the Russians.
One last question, Larry, and it's a bit of a political question. I wonder if you see something contrary about McCain assuming this sort of fake presidential mantle this week, now, while Barack Obama was on vacation. In other words, if McCain only acts this way when Obama is not around, does that suggest that McCain is actually sort of acting more vice presidential than presidential?
Yeah. He's sort of substituting. We'll see what happens when he has the meeting with Pastor Warren this weekend, you know, when Senator Obama is back on the stage. And I think this is what we really need to get back to. Let's discuss the policy options of both candidates.
Lawrence Korb of the Center for American Progress, formerly Assistant Defense Secretary under President Reagan, thank you for your time tonight.
Nice to be with you.